afternoon, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us for a powerful conversation around learner agency and the possibilities it makes available for young people in learning environments around the country. My name is Neel Pujar. I'm a founding team member of Design 39 campus and a former student board member of Poway Unified School District in San Diego, California. And currently I'm a fellow with Education Reimagined. And I'm joined today by three amazing young people. First off, we have Erubey Lopez, and he'll wait for us. Erubey is a he's a junior at Epic Academy in Hyde Park, Vermont. Epic Academy is a part-time and full-time program within a school. Epic Academy is reimagining the high school experience by putting young people in the driver's seat. And instead of earning their graduation proficiencies in traditional classes, Epic invites young people to learn about and showcase their mastery through projects they design and they care about. Erubey also works with several young people youth empowerment organizations like Up for Learning, focusing on youth-adult partnerships and building public understanding for change in education. Next, we have Grace Caboco, who is a graduating senior from Iowa Big in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and she's an incoming freshman at Texas Christian University. She'll be studying youth advocacy and educational studies. Iowa Big is a public part-time program partnering with 3 local districts in the Cedar Rapids area. BIG exists to assist young people in developing their own learner agency, efficacy, and passions while gaining valuable real-world and academic skills so they can succeed in an adaptable and changing world. As part of the program, young people take their normal classes at their neighborhood high schools, and they work on community projects at BIG that partner with their local businesses, local nonprofits, and community partners. And lastly, but certainly not least, we also have Colby Mills, who is a graduating senior of Pike Road High School in Pike Road, Alabama. And Colby was part of the launch of a district with a learner-centered vision, and he's currently working to bring learner-centered education to high schoolers across the country. So with that, I'm incredibly excited to dive into today's conversation, though I wanted to provide a little bit of context about Education Reimagined, who are the organizers of this panel, and also learner-centered education more broadly. So Education Reimagined is an organization that's committed to making learner-centered education available to all young people, regardless of background or circumstance. And when we say learner-centered education, what we mean is an adaptable education that recognizes and values each young person as unique and whole human beings who are supported to develop agency to find their purpose in the world and their community. And when operating within a learner-centered paradigm, we see 5 elements that emerge naturally. The first element is competency-based, and that means that we acknowledge the skills and dispositions in which young people are growing their competence in, regardless of where it happens or who it's with. Next, we believe that learning is personalized, relevant, and contextualized. And this is much more than self-paced curriculum. Rather, learning is also relevant and contextualized because it starts where each learner is at and builds a pathway to allow them to achieve success, whatever it might mean for them. Next, we also believe that learning is open-walled, and the community and the world are our playground for learning. And pushing this idea further, it means that learning is a natural phenomenon that can happen at any time in any place. Finally, we have socially embedded, and that means that learner-centered environments recognize that learning is a social endeavor. That means that communities are intentionally created to craft spaces of acceptance and welcoming, and we believe that each person should be seen as a whole human being in their learning. And the focus of today's conversation is learner agency. And that means that we're creating environments that support young people to co-create their own learning experience with their peers and adult partners. And it's about empowering learners to discover their sense of purpose, recognizing their own unique interests, passions, strengths, needs, and aspirations. And all 5 of these elements are really key to any learner-centered environment. And although we're going to be focusing on learner agency for this conversation, in the course of what you hear from today's learners, you're likely going to hear all 5 elements touched upon. And this is really because all 5 elements are really coordinated together and they're interconnected. So you really can't have one without the other. So with that, we're going to dive into the panel discussion. So a quick overview of how things are going to work today. I'm going to start by posing some questions to the group. And during the conversation, we're more than welcome to utilize the chat feature to post your wonderings, insights, and questions. And as and when it's relevant, I'll do my best to incorporate your questions real time into the conversation, or if there's time at the end, we'll have some time dedicated to that. And as you listen, we also encourage you to tweet out your insights using the hashtag #ANewWayForward on Twitter. And you're more than welcome to check us out at educationreimagined.org or reach out to us via the chat if there's any other wonderings that you have. So I've kept you waiting long enough, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So for the first question for our panelists, I'm going to start a little bit broad. So through your learner-centered experience, what is a major aha that you've had about yourself, and how did this shift how you participate in your education? And we'll go ahead and start with Colby.
Yeah, so I'm Colby again, and I think that the major aha came from having a voice initially. So having the voice of students altogether just shifted the way that I look at the education system, I think, because I was taking a more active role in how my education was working for and with me, and looking at shaping my own education system because we were such a new program at the time. And so I think that was like the shift, was being able to have that agency and voice in shaping not only the environment, but the way that I wanted to learn and the way that I wanted to interact with my peers and the people that were guiding me in that learning. Like just completely shifted what I thought education looked like, because what I thought before was that it looked like playing a game.
And Erubey, you kind of had a similar point of view too, where you felt like your education was kind of a game. Could you talk about what was that shift like for you when you transitioned into EPIC?
Absolutely. I'm a little bit new to the learner-centered environment. Our environment just sparked up this year, but I was part of the steering committee that helped bring it to life. I completely agree with what Colby said about, I come from a more traditional environment in schooling before my work at EPIC Academy. And really that was a game. The level of assessment, take the test, forget the information, repeat. It was something that, some students could do well, and others really couldn't. I was lucky enough to be one of the students who, could do well playing the game, but the thing is I didn't really find any joy in what I was doing. I didn't find like any relevancy or personalization until I found my learner-centered environment. And really one of the big ahas that I had was that, there are really multiple ways to be successful as a student. I mean, it doesn't just have to be, acing the test or the, that 1600 SAT score. It's so much more than that. So that's really my big aha. And, as, Gemma said, I couldn't say it any more eloquently. Learning, can be fun. There should be joy there.
Excellent. We have a question from Linnea, who asks has a very good perspective. She's saying, I often go to school with the mindset of I have to get good grades and do high school assignments to be good and be smart. So Erubey, you mentioned that you kind of adopted a new viewpoint on learning as a result of EPIC. So how did you kind of shift from the traditional point of view where you saw your grades as defining you versus really freeing yourself and moving beyond that?
Well, I'd say that falls really in, the passion aspect of EPIC. There's so much more time to, discover who you really are as a learner, to explore your passions. And that might not be something that you get in a super traditional environment, for sure.
Excellent, thank you. And Grace, what was an aha that you've had about your learning at Iowa Big, and how has that changed how you participate in your education?
I think that one thing that I've learned through Iowa Big is that reflecting back on more traditional style learning, I just started Iowa Big last year, and it's always taught that there's only two ways of succeeding. You either are good at test taking or you're not good at test taking. You're either good at working in groups or you're not good at working in groups. And Iowa Big really factors on the point that each individual aspect of how you learn and how you can teach others are so valuable in a team and in growing and in being successful. And I think that as a person who grew up with the mindset that I was a very independent learner and I didn't really enjoy working in groups, shifting my mindset onto the fact that that mindset can be effective in group settings. And Iowa Big really fostered that idea, and that was really helpful in growing over the past 2 years.
Excellent. So all of you in your learner-centered experiences have had the opportunity to develop your own sense of learner agency. So in kind of thinking back and reflecting on what that process was like for you, what has come to be your distinction of what learner agency means? So what does it mean to you? And what does it look like to kind of build up that agency through your learner-centered career? Feel free to jump in.
So I think for me, that distinction has been having options. So like I think at the core of learner agency and just learner centered altogether, the ability to choose and understanding that learning in different ways is a real thing, that every child learns in a way that is very specific to themselves. And so having options to even do things traditionally is an important aspect, I think, of agency. So with my agency, I realized that I was like able to use my voice and speak to like my superintendent about ways that we can advance learner-centered in our own district. And he listened, and I was able to kind of work with him and bring a school within a school model to Pike Road to make a more advanced learner-centered model. And then what it's meant to me most recently has been kind of exploring my passions and making the decision to take a gap year because I want to kind of dive further into exploring my options and, you know, looking at what the adult world looks like for me and, you know, making an informed decision about what college I want to go to and, you know, what things really speak to me. So.
Thank you.
I think the transition into Iowa Big, personally, developing that learner agency was pretty intimidating at first. It is fueling, but it is intimidating because you realize that you have that choice and it's not just given to you, and you don't have to fit into the social norm of what is going on in your classroom and in standardized testing and all those things. And so I think that developing that agency, in my point of view, was learning to become independent, but also knowing that that independent mindset is so can contribute to others, and that every single person in your group, whether they have the same mindset as you, whether they like taking tests or they like that more traditional structure of school, or maybe they like a more flexible style of learning, that they all have things that they can contribute to that group, and that those things are so valuable and they shouldn't be pushed aside, but also they should just be appreciated in the group setting.
Excellent. And Grace, you kind of share an interesting perspective that learner agency is much more than you just functioning as an independent agent in your learning. It's also collaborative with others. So can you kind of talk about how Iowa Big develops a shared sense of agency with not only you and also your peers?
So Iowa Big does a really good job of pushing the fact that you as a group can truly work and be more successful than you can as an individual. And at first, personally, me being an independent learner, that was a really hard idea to grasp. But from the get-go, they put us into small groups, and they made sure that we were equally sharing our ideas and our opinions and what we thought that the group could be successful in. And being in that environment, and not necessarily just being an individual learner and then going into a group, but from the get-go just going right into that group setting was really important and very vital in the way that I developed my mindset about group settings and group learning. And that really sparked an interest in me about getting more in-depth and learning more about learner agency.
Thank you. And Erubey, what does learner agency meant to you, and how has your development journey looked as you've explored what that meant?
Yeah, well, for me, learner agency has been the ability to really, I guess, pave my own learning and, you know, to take the learning into my own hands, but also to have the ability to advocate for myself as a learner, which isn't a super easy thing to learn. And where I really developed a sense of learner agency wasn't necessarily in the classroom, but really it was first through my work with Up for Learning. And Up for Learning is a nonprofit here in Vermont, which works statewide to connect students and foster youth adult partnerships for school change. And my learner agency was really developed by adults and my mentors looking at me in a completely different way than I'd ever been looked at. I had a completely, I was regarded completely differently. It was this complete change from the, traditional teacher to student relationship. And mostly because I was looked at as a partner. I was looked at as, someone who brought something super valuable to the table, which was, my experience as being a learner. And so, just, creating these new relationships and such as given me all of these skills, and I've, been more engaged in my education because I've had a say and I've communicated with my administration and, for sure. So, you can't understand this, but.
No worries. Thank you so much for sharing. And that transition from being seen as kind of a passive participant in your learning to an active partner is a really powerful shift, especially for a young person. And I think we can all agree with that. We have a question from Samantha asking what tips or suggestions you might have to encourage students that are being placed into an environment with more learner agency. How did they develop that capacity to take ownership of their learning? And this is to all of you.
I think the first tip that I would have is becoming more aware of how you personally learn. That was a big step for me personally, is growing and just being more aware of what I really needed in my education and what I was good at and what I needed help on. And that takes time and it takes real dedication to identify how you are as a student, because we are often there are lots of ways that we try to put students on the same path of learning, and we try to give them tips and tools that we think would help them, but in the end it might not help how they learn and how they adapt and how they see the world. And so I think just being more aware of those things and being aware of how do I take notes? How do I engage in classroom activities? How do I engage in small groups? And the more you're aware of that, the more agency you develop, and the more you can also teach your peers around you to develop their own agency as well.
Excellent, thank you. And that idea that learner agency is also about discovering who you are as an individual learner and really discovering what that means. Erubey, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that I really agree with that. And, the fact that it's coming through a deep knowledge of yourself, you can gain this agency. But I also think that agency comes through, kind of questioning the kind of status quo of traditional education and, questioning, the model that you're in, questioning for its relevancy, for, how personalized it is, what you're getting out of it. I think that has been what I've been taught, and it's been super successful for me.
Thank you, Erubey. So as we think about how you've kind of developed your own learner agency through your learner-centered experiences, what roles have the adult mentors in your learning environments played in developing that?
I think they played a huge role. I mean, I don't think I would be where I am at all without the support of my adult mentors. And those mentors are anywhere from educators to admin at my school to just adults in the community that have provided learning opportunities for us and that just support us as human beings and as students. I think educators have been my biggest supporters, and have shaped my life the most because they know me and they, get to know each of us as learners, but also as human beings, and really help us explore our passions. So I think that they have guided me most, and that relationship that I've had with each one of my adult mentors as educators has shown me that maybe I have a voice worth listening to, and that there are a lot of opportunities that they've provided me. So, like, even beyond school, there are community-based organizations and people that they have connected me with, and that's oddly enough how I got connected with Education Reimagined and the movement to advance learner-centered education. So those people are committed to seeking out and connecting learners with those kinds of opportunities so that we can continue to learn outside of that school building.
Thank you, Colby.
I personally think a big thing that my educators have taught me is that education is multidirectional. It's not just from teacher to student. It's from student to teacher, from student to student, from teacher to teacher, and from student to community. That it doesn't have to just be one way or even two ways. It can go from anywhere you want it to be. And that has been something that I'm so thankful that my teachers have taught me that idea and that mindset, because it helped me grow so much to be appreciative of the community that I'm placed in, but also appreciate the fact that I've learned so much from my students or my fellow students. And even I think that students have helped our teachers grow and learn different mindsets and different ideas from the things that we've faced in our learning and our adaptability over the past 2 years. And so that's a big thing that educators have placed in my life that I'm super thankful for.
Thank you, Grace.
I love that idea that, learning is multi-directional. I think that's brilliant. I think that's like the perfect model. I really think that, this partnership, from between mentor and learner is really powerful as well, because I feel that school is, just as much, if not more, about personal growth than it is about academics, and the relationships that we have really give us the opportunity to grow on a super personal level. And my mentors have, I kind of give them, full credit for being so great that I can call my educational experience in high school super successful. And, they made it that way. They made it that way by, being there for me on, such a personal level, such an understanding, empathetic level. For sure.
Thank you, Erubey. And we have an interesting question from Will Foote. He's suggesting that we encourage curiosity, especially amongst those where the idea of finding a passion can be intimidating for a young person our age. So when you entered into your learning environments for the first time, how did your adult mentors foster an environment of curiosity to get you interested about your learning?
Yeah, so I kind of oscillated in the beginning of this conversation when you asked for my aha moment. I think another one of those was walking in the doors and being asked, like, what are you passionate about and what do you want to do? Because it like blew my mind that they even cared, right? And I had no clue. And so I think after being provided with opportunities and the ability to look at my learning as it is and kind of shift how that works and look at bringing your passions to the table, at some point I think there's only so much adult mentors can do, because at the end yourself, and so exploring that I think was the hardest but also the most rewarding part of my learning experience, is like exploring the opportunities that I'm given and understanding what does and doesn't work for me, and then designing what my learning looks like after that based on that.
Thank you. And Grace, you had a really great story about the hydroponics project at Iowa Big. And that was something that you may not have chosen to do on your own, though it was something that you eventually got really excited about. So could you share that story with the panel if you're willing?
Yeah. So at Iowa Big, we have different projects that are usually fueled off of your interests and ideas. And I think Iowa Big does a great job of letting us choose projects with the community and make partners. But they also encourage us to choose something out of our comfort zone and choose something that we might have not been interested in. And so this year I joined a hydroponics project, which before this year, I really had no idea what hydroponics was. I didn't really know how it could affect my community, but being on that project, it puts a different perspective in my mind about the things our community faces and the ways that even something simple like hydroponics helps out with the homeless community and in our community and the problems that is faced with small businesses that want to strive for sustainable foods and growth. And that project fuels a lot more interest in my team than I even would imagine. We have lots of people going into nonprofit organization, lots of people going into business, lot of people going into environmental sustainability. And so that one project that I didn't even think that I had an interest in fuels so much more interest going forward. And I think that curiosity and that idea that just being curious about the things that are in your community and what that could eventually turn out to be in the future.
Yeah, that's really excellent. And I think the idea that, and it kind of goes back to Colby's point, where learner agency is about those options and providing that exposure. So being able to see all the pathways that are available to you and willingly choose which one you want to go to can lead to some amazing discoveries. And we have a question from Ella Hort talking about how you share your learner-centered experiences and strategies with other peers. And can you kind of talk through what that's like, especially for people like Grace and Erubey, who kind of have the dual experience of going to both a conventional and a learner-centered environment. What has that been like to share what's going on in your learner-centered environment with your peers?
I think for me personally, there's a stigma that when you're in a learner-centered environment that you're not doing as much work as you are in a traditional environment. And that was a huge barrier that I had to overcome, especially in my first year. And I was sharing these opportunities and ideas that I was super excited about. And it was seen as I wasn't doing as much work when they were measuring their amount of work as assignments and tests and things that they were doing. And I was measuring my work and the opportunities and the people that I was meeting and the conversations I was having in my community. And so overcoming that barrier of it's not about how much work you do, it's the growth that you're making as a person. It's the opportunities that you're faced with and the challenges that you overcome. And it doesn't have to be overcoming a bad grade or a hard assignment. It can be overcoming hard things like not getting a scholarship that you expected to get or not finishing a deadline for a project that you were really passionate about. So that was a big thing that was hard for me to manage, but I was really thankful for getting to share that barrier, especially with my students that didn't get that opportunity that I was having.
Yeah, I just want to, echo that. It resonated when you said the piece on, a stigma is that, we don't do as much work at all. Definitely feel that. You go into the traditional classroom and they're like, oh, so you just do projects all day? That sounds a little bit, but like, no, I mean, yes, literally you do, but it like you said, it is so much more than that. And and I that's really what I've tried to convey to my peers, like the fact that I find like true meaning in what I'm doing, and that's super important to me.
Thank you for sharing. So I guess this kind of leads us to our next question. So all of you have had the experience of engaging in really powerful learner-centered experiences. whether directly or tangentially through your involvement in your extracurricular activities. So what kind of keeps you committed to staying true to learner-centered? What has you say yes to want to make this type of education available to all kids in the US?
It works and it makes sense. Um, the system now is one size fits all, and doesn't fit the needs of most, if any, learner. And what Learner Center does, like I said before, it provides options and looks at the learner as a whole and adapts to you instead of you adapting to the system, because that's not what we need to be as human beings. And so it gives you an active role in your learning and helps you explore who you are and build a sense of identity as well as agency, because we are humans, so we need agency, we need support, and we need capacity to make choices for our own lives, and we need support from people who know us well and care about us as human beings and understand that there are barriers to learning and understand that there are different types of learning, and understand that we are young people who are exploring what we are ourselves, and so we don't need to conform to a system. We need the system to conform to us.
Thank you, Colby.
I think another thing is just advocating for the fact that education is about learners. It's about students. It is for us, and the idea that we don't get a say in that and get a say in what we want to do and what we want to learn about is challenging, because we're put in the same one size fits all education, like Colby was saying, and then we're put into a world that doesn't use that boundary anymore, and that it inspires you to reach beyond your potential. But how are you learning how to reach that potential if you've never been taught that? And we're making students unlearn the things that they're forced to learn, and to be in that context. And so learner-centered education is super important for me, just for advocating for those students and sharing the fact that students deserve a right to choose and deserve the right to pick what they want to learn in and grow in that system, and grow as learners to help our community and help our world adapt and prosper.
Thank you.
I agree. Learners, deserve, to have meaning in their, high school careers, not just, feel like they have to coast by as, a step to get to the next level of their education. For sure. I'm, committed to making learner education available, just because I see, students struggling like nearly on a daily from the positions that I, have in my school as being a member of, student council and such. And it's really unfortunate. I was on a peer-to-peer kind of tutoring call, which is a service that we kind of set up at our school. And I was on a call with this freshman, and I was trying to, convince, this person that the 9-page biology packet that she gets signed every week and, of course is behind on in this time of distance learning is, worth doing. And, I honestly couldn't believe it. She had, was biology. She had 2 beautiful like songbirds perched on her shoulder the whole call. I mean, like, there's so much, more relevant things than, pages of, biology questions. I mean, there's a huge crisis going on, there's things that she's passionate about. She obviously, love those, birds, and they were beautiful. They were, quite colorful. They were cute.
Excellent.
But
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. So thank you all so much for sharing. I'm seeing lots of really great questions being asked in the chat, and I do want to dedicate some time at the end of today's session to address those. So before I do want to thank all of our learners for sharing their incredible stories with us. And as you'll notice, all of these learners are exceptional young people, but in learner-centered environments, they are the norm. So that's what keeps me really excited and committed to making sure that learner-centered education is available for all kids in the US. So with that, we'll turn to some of the questions in our chat. And Mark Lang is referencing the quote that Dr. Martin shared early on from Jamar, where he said that he was looking for learner-centered environments to distinguish how individual learners were smart and kind of encouraging them to discover their own strengths and capacities for success. So can you talk a little bit about how your learner-centered environments have cultivated those strengths in you?
For me, my learner-centered environment at the Academy has kind of completely, not completely, but almost completely shifted assessment. There's huge emphasis on transferable skills and habits of work, which are super important. And frankly, I feel that they need to be, emphasized more in the traditional setting. In Vermont, we're looking at if we have proficiency-based learning as a mandated statewide. But yeah, it's kind of shifting that you're smart if you can answer this amount of questions correctly. It's shifting that to something more personal.
Thank you, Erubey.
I think a big thing also, being basically dual enrolled in Iowa Big and my traditional school, the way that Iowa Big assesses us is we are on standard-based grading as a state level. And so they basically assess us on if you complete the standards that are required for your knowledge and you're able to apply that into your projects and apply that into your learning and explain why these things happen and why these things are applicable, then you have completed those standards. And translating that back into traditional school, that is not seen as completely passing that with 100%. It's passing that with about a 95. And so when you're in Iowa Big, you're seeing these things as milestones, as things that you're saying, yes, I know how to apply these standards because I understand why they work and why they're applied in my projects and why they're applied in my community. But back in traditional school, it's seen as, all right, you've completed it, but you haven't gone above and beyond. And it's a really hard parallel to be in between the two of trying to prove that you're going above and beyond, but knowing that you are going above and beyond in your learning. And so the idea of smart and being intelligent is something that I think I've struggled with over the past few years. It's because I have so many friends who are getting hundreds and excelling in their AP classes and advanced classes, but they don't know how to apply those things in their daily life. They don't know the relevance that has in their communities. And for a person who strives to make sure that the learning that they're doing is being applicable in their community, it's hard to say, I feel like I'm smart because I know how to apply those things, but they know that they're smart because they get 100 in all their classes. And so it's a really hard paradigm to communicate in between the two.
Thank you, Grace. We have a question from Kaija regarding learners that learn different ways and have learning differences. So can you talk a little bit about how learner-centered environments support learners regardless of their circumstance, whether they have executive functioning difficulties or whether they learn in unique ways?
Yeah, and so, I mean, again, as I said before, I think what the core of learner-centered is having options and understanding how people learn. And so if they are in that paradigm of needing a conventional structure, that's not unavailable to them, because I don't think that there is a right way to do education. I think that the right way is adaptability. And so adapting to those needs of learners is essential if we're looking at, actually making learners have agency and fitting their needs. And I think, that's a huge piece for sure.
Thank you, Colby. And I want to jump in really quickly. Whenever parents or educators ask me about learners with learning differences, I'm always reminded of a young student at Design 39 who I worked with in preparing him to lead tours of our schools. His name was James. And he, like your son, also struggled with executive functioning. And he was leading a tour one day, and a parent asked him point blank, how does Design 39 support kids with special needs? And his response was really powerful. And he said that if you think about it, we all have special needs. And it was just like what Colby said, the core of Learner Centered is meeting kids where they are and where they're at. And regardless of where they come from or what or how they learn or any difficulties that they might have, they're all reoriented and treated as strengths. And they're really brought in and invited fully into the learning experience. So I want to thank you for your question. So I am watching the clock. So I do want to spend a little bit of time to make sure that we're all oriented for the upcoming closing section. So I do want to take this opportunity to thank our learners again for sharing their stories. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions that were being asked. And I wish this conversation could continue. I'm sure it could go on for hours. But as we think about the current pandemic situation, learners and parents and educators and everyone in the education system is being asked to grapple with our fundamental beliefs of education in a whole new way. And I hope that the insights shared by our panelists have inspired you and have left you seeing new possibilities for what education can pose in the future. So in these last few minutes, I invite you to tweet one takeaway you've had from this panel using the hashtag A New Way Forward. And you can also learn more about Education Reimagined and read the profiles of these amazing schools and these amazing learners on our website at education-reimagined.org. And remember that the closing section starts at 1:45 and the instructions will be posted on your screen shortly. And I want to thank everyone again for joining us this hour. And if our learners have any closing thoughts they'd like to leave our audience with in the last 2 minutes, you're welcome to jump in.
I think a big thing that if I were to talk to every educator, every person who is out there, I just want to say that education is for students, and learner-centered education is focusing that back on the students and focusing on the fact that students deserve to choose and deserve to be a part of what they're learning, and making sure that you are getting to know them as much as they want to get to know you, and getting that value of trust and understanding between the two of them. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. And any closing pieces of advice?
Well, thanks, guys. I would just say, look at this COVID opportunity and look at where your learners are right now, and find those pockets when you get back, and become a pocket, if you can, of allowing learner agency and student voice, as well as meeting learners where they are, providing equity, and looking at everyone's context regardless of who they are in your system, because everyone learns differently and everyone exists differently.
Powerful said. Thank you so much again, everyone, and to our panelists and to our amazing parents, educators, and students that have all joined us today. We wish you all the best. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.